Welcome back, fellow explorers, for another deep dive into the depths of knowledge here on the Deep Dive. Speaking of diving into depths, I heard a joke the other day.
Oh,
Yeah, it was about a clam who went to a casino. I guess he bet everything he had on one spin of the roulette wheel, but he lost it all.
oh no.
Yeah. And as the clam was walking out, sad and dejected, the casino manager stopped him and said, "Hey, don't worry, we have a shell station right outside."
Oh, I get it. That's a good one.
Yeah.
I like that.
Well, anyway, I'm Harry, and of course, I'm joined by Kimi, our resident expert, ready to embark on another fascinating adventure.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
So, Kimi, today we are going to, dive deep into the world of a truly fascinating creature, the giant anteater.
Yes, a remarkable animal indeed. The giant anteater, scientifically known as Myrmecophaga tridactyla, is a fascinating mammal native to Central and South America.
Right, and before we get too far, we've got some great research and articles to work with today, and I think our mission here is to unearth some really amazing facts about this animal and, really just explore what makes it so unique.
Absolutely. It's a creature full of surprises and, well, a few misconceptions as well.
Yeah, I'm already intrigued. Just the name Giant Anteater, it conjures up images of, something pretty impressive.
And it certainly lives up to its name. These animals are the largest of the four living anteater species, and in fact, they are the sole surviving member of their genus.
So how giant are we talking?
Well, they can reach a length of anywhere between 182 to 217 centimeters.
Wow, that's like over 6 feet long, and that's not even including the tail.
Exactly, and that tail itself can be quite substantial, adding to their overall size. In terms of weight, males can tip the scales at 33 to 50 kilograms.
That's pretty hefty.
It is. And females, while slightly smaller, still come in at a respectable 27 to 47 kilograms.
So they're definitely not your average anteater.
Not at all. Their size alone sets them apart, making them the largest representative within their suborder.
And it's not just their size. They have this really distinctive look, right?
Absolutely, that elongated snout, which can reach around 30 centimeters in length.
It's like a built-in straw for slurping up ants.
It certainly serves that purpose, and then there's that bushy tail, which adds to their overall bulk.
And those claws, I've seen pictures. Those claws are seriously intimidating.
Oh, absolutely. Those long, powerful foreclaws are essential for accessing their food sources, and they play a role in their defense as well.
So I imagine they're not something you want to mess with.
No, not at all. They can inflict some serious damage with those claws if they feel threatened.
And their coloring, it's pretty striking too, isn't it?
It is quite distinctive, mostly grayish, brown, or black, often with mottled white markings.
I've seen pictures where they have these white front legs with black rings around the wrists, almost like they're wearing little bracelets.
Yes, exactly. And the hind legs tend to be darker, with a brown tail.
And there's that bold black band that runs from their throat down to their shoulders, right?
Precisely, a thick black mark with white outlines, often with a slightly erect mane. It's a very striking feature.
I always find it fascinating to learn about the origins of scientific names, and the giant anteater's binomial name, Myrmecophaga tridactyla, is actually pretty descriptive, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Carl Linnaeus, who came up with the system of binomial nomenclature back in 1758, really hit the nail on the head with this one. Myrmecophaga comes from the Greek words for ant and eater, which is pretty straightforward.
Yeah, no ambiguity there.
And tridactyla also comes from Greek, meaning 3 fingers, referring to those 3 prominent claws on their front feet.
So their scientific name basically tells us they're 3-fingered anteaters.
Precisely, though you might also come across the synonym Myrmecophaga jubata in some older texts.
Speaking of taxonomy, I understand there's some debate about the existence of subspecies within the giant anteater population.
That's right. There's been a suggestion of 3 subspecies, MT tridactyla, MT centralis, and MT artata.
So are they all exactly the same, or are there subtle differences between these proposed subspecies?
Well, the distinctions are subtle, primarily relating to variations in size and coloration depending on their geographic location, but further research is needed to definitively confirm their status as distinct subspecies.
Makes sense. And taking a step back to look at their broader classification, giant anteaters belong to the order Pelosa, which they share with sloths, and the superorder Xenarthra, which also includes armadillos, right?
Exactly. These classifications highlight some fascinating evolutionary relationships, placing them within a lineage that has a long and rich history in South America.
And speaking of evolutionary history, I was reading that the split between The Xenarthran orders, the armadillos, and the anteaters and sloths happened a long time ago.
Oh, yes, a very long time ago. We're talking about approximately 66 million years ago, around the time of the dinosaur extinction.
So they were already around when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth.
That's right. And then the anteaters and sloths diverged from each other around 55 million years ago.
And within the anteaters, there were further splits.
Yes. The silky anteater, or cyclops, diverged from other anteaters around 40 million years ago. And then the giant anteater lineage, Myrmecophaga, separated from the tamandua about 10 million years ago.
That's amazing. Millions of years of evolution have shaped these creatures into what they are today.
It's a truly remarkable evolutionary journey, and it's fascinating to think about the environmental pressures that have led to their unique adaptations.
You know, it's a lesser-known fact that for much of their evolutionary history, anteaters were actually confined to South America.
That's right. They were essentially isolated on that continent until a very significant geological event occurred.
What was that?
Well, the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, that narrow strip of land that connects North and South America, happened around 3 million years ago. And this event created a land bridge that allowed for a massive exchange of animals between the two continents.
Oh, I see. So the anteaters were finally able to expand their range northward.
Exactly. They were part of this great faunal interchange, known as the Great American Interchange, which resulted in a significant mixing of species between North and South America.
So given their long history in South America, they must be pretty adaptable to a variety of habitat.
Oh, they are. You'll find giant anteaters in a surprisingly diverse range of environments, from open grasslands to dense rainforests.
So they're not picky about where they live.
Not particularly, although they do seem to prefer foraging in more open areas while seeking the cover of forests for resting and sleeping.
That makes sense. It gives them access to both food sources and protection.
Precisely. And speaking of behavior, it might surprise some people to learn that giant anteaters are mostly solitary creatures.
So they're not hanging out in big groups.
No, not at all. You typically see them alone, except for mothers with their young offspring, and of course during the mating season.
So no big anteater parties going on.
Not that we've observed, and while they may not be social butterflies, the bond between a mother and her offspring is quite strong.
Yeah, I've seen those heartwarming images of mothers carrying their young on their backs.
It's an endearing sight, and it actually serves a practical purpose as well, providing camouflage for the youngster.
Right, because the pup's markings often blend in with the mother's fur, making them less visible to predators.
Exactly. And this piggyback arrangement continues until the young one is weaned and can fend for itself.
It's amazing how nature has evolved these strategies for survival.
It is. And while their eyesight might not be their strongest sense, they have an incredible sense of smell.
I've heard it's something like 40 times stronger than a human sense of smell.
That's right. It's estimated to be about 40 times more acute than ours, which is essential for locating their primary food sources.
Makes sense, since ants and termites are often hidden underground or within mounds and nests.
Absolutely. They need that keen sense of smell to sniff out those insect colonies.
Now, speaking of their movements, their gait is quite unique, isn't it?
It is. They have this unusual way of walking where they walk on their front knuckles.
Knuckles.
Yes, knuckles, much like gorillas and chimpanzees do.
So why do they do that?
Well, it's thought to be an adaptation to protect their long claws from wearing down.
Oh, I see. So by walking on their knuckles, they keep those claws sharp and ready for digging.
Exactly. And their hind feet are plantigrade, meaning they walk with the soles of their feet flat on the ground.
It's like they have two different walking styles, one for the front and one for the back.
In a way, yes. And this combination of knuckle walking and plantigrade locomotion is part of what makes them so distinctive.
And that hook and pull digging technique they use, it's pretty powerful, right?
Oh, incredibly powerful. Their bone structure and musculature are specially adapted for ripping open ant and termite nests.
I can imagine those claws sinking into the earth, tearing through those mounds with ease.
It's quite a sight to behold and a testament to their strength and determination when it comes to finding food.
So we've talked about their size, their appearance, their evolutionary history, and their movement. What about their daily routine? What's a typical day like for a giant anteater?
Well, they're generally active during the day, though they can also be nocturnal depending on the temperature and whether they're being disturbed by human activity.
So they're adaptable in that sense, active when it suits them best.
Yes, and when they're not out foraging for food, they spend a considerable amount of time resting and sleeping.
I imagine all that digging and slurping up insects can be pretty tiring.
I would think so. And for a mammal of their size, they actually have a relatively low body temperature.
Really?
Yes, around 33 degrees Celsius, which is a bit lower than most mammals.
And their metabolic rate is also lower than you might expect, right?
Exactly. It's thought that this lower metabolic rate could be an adaptation to their specialized diet, which is relatively low in energy compared to the diets of other mammals.
So they've evolved to conserve energy, which makes sense given their lifestyle.
Precisely. And when it comes to sleeping, they have a rather adorable habit of curling up into a ball.
I've seen pictures. It's like they disappear under their own bushy tail.
It is. They use their tail as both a blanket and a form of camouflage, blending in with their surroundings.
And sometimes they seek shelter in dense brush or tall grass, right?
They do anything to make themselves less conspicuous while they're resting.
And I was surprised to learn that they actually enjoy bathing.
Yes, they've been observed taking dips in water, and they're even capable of swimming across fairly wide rivers.
Swimming. That's not something I would have associated with anteaters.
It's not their primary mode of locomotion, of course, but they can certainly handle themselves in the water if needed.
And they can climb too, right?
They can. They've been known to climb termite mounds and even trees, though they're not as adept at climbing as some other arboreal animals.
Still, it's impressive for a creature of their size and build.
It is. It just goes to show that they're more versatile than people might initially think.
And their home ranges can vary quite a bit in size, right?
They can. Some individuals might have a home range of just a few square kilometers, while others might roam over a much larger area, sometimes up to 30 square kilometers or more.
So what factors influence the size of their home range?
Well, it's likely related to the availability of food resources. If there's an abundance of ants and termites in a smaller area, they won't need to travel as far to find food.
Makes sense. And how do they communicate with each other?
Well, they're not very vocal animals, so their communication primarily relies on scent.
Scent.
Yes, they have scent glands, and they use secretions from those glands to mark their territory and communicate with other anteaters.
So it's like a chemical language.
It is, and they also use visual cues, leaving scratch marks on trees to signal their presence.
It's like leaving a message for other anteaters.
In a way, yes, and there's even some evidence that they might be able to recognize each other through the scent of their saliva.
Really? That's fascinating. So they might be leaving little saliva trails as they forage.
It's possible, and this could be another way for them to communicate with each other.
It's amazing how much we still have to learn about animal communication.
Absolutely. And while giant anteaters are generally solitary creatures, there are times when they do interact with each other, particularly during the mating season, and these interactions can sometimes be quite aggressive.
So there are anteater battles.
Not exactly battles, but males can engage in aggressive displays and even physical confrontations to establish dominance and compete for mates.
I imagine those claws come into play during these confrontations.
They certainly can. They'll rear up on their hind legs using their bushy tails for balance and lash out with those claws.
It sounds pretty intense.
It can be, but it's all part of the natural order of things, ensuring that the strongest and healthiest males have the best chance of passing on their genes.
Now let's talk about the heart of their existence. Their diet.
Ah, yes. The giant anteater, a creature of specialized tastes.
Specialized? How so?
Well, they are what we call obligate insectivores, meaning that their diet consists almost entirely of insects.
And their insects of choice are ants and termites, right?
Exactly. Ants and termites make up the bulk of their diet, though they will occasionally supplement their meals with beetle larvae and even western honeybees if the opportunity arises.
So they're not just eating any insect they come across, they have their preferences.
They do, and they're highly skilled at finding and consuming their preferred prey.
So how do they go about finding all these ants and termites?
Well, it all starts with that incredibly sensitive nose. They use their keen sense of smell to detect ant and termite colonies, often located underground or within mounds.
It's like they have a built-in radar for ant nests.
In a way, yes, they can sniff out these colonies from a distance, and once they've located a potential food source, they get to work with those powerful claws.
Ripping open the nests with ease.
Precisely. Those claws are perfectly designed for breaking into ant and termite nests, and then comes the truly remarkable part.
The tongue, right?
Yes, the tongue. It's truly an extraordinary organ, both in its length and its function.
I've read it can reach up to 60 centimeters long.
That's right, about 2 feet long, and of that length, about 45 centimeters can be extended out of the mouth.
Wow, that's almost half the length of their body.
It is, and it's covered in these backward-facing papillae, tiny little projections that help to scoop up the insects.
So it's not just long, it's sticky too.
Very sticky, covered in a thick, sticky saliva that traps the ants and termites, preventing them from escaping.
It's like flypaper for insects.
In a sense, yes, and they can collect an astonishing number of insects with each swipe of that tongue.
How many are we talking?
Well, it's estimated that they can consume up to 35,000 individual insects in a single day.
35,000, that's incredible.
It is, and they might visit as many as 200 different nests in a day to get their fill.
So they're constantly on the move, searching for the next meal.
They are, and the speed at which they can move that tongue is remarkable, flicking it in and out at a rate of around 160 times per minute.
That's almost 3 times a second.
It is, and there are some fascinating anatomical features that allow them to do this.
Like what?
Well, for one, their tongue is actually anchored to their sternum, the breastbone, by a unique muscle called the sternoglossus.
So it's not just attached at the back of the mouth like our tongues, it's connected all the way down to the chest.
Exactly, and they have this very flexible V-shaped hyoid apparatus, a set of bones in the neck, that provides support for the tongue's movement.
It's like a skeletal framework that allows for that incredible range of motion.
Precisely. And another interesting adaptation is that they have no teeth.
No teeth at all.
None whatsoever, which might seem strange for an animal that eats insects, but they've evolved a different strategy for dealing with their prey.
So how do they break down those hard-bodied insects?
Well, their jaws don't move much, but they use their tongue to sweep up insects and then press them against the roof of their mouth, which is hard and ridged.
So they essentially crush the insects between their tongue and the roof of their mouth.
Exactly. It's a very efficient system, and they swallow almost constantly while they're feeding.
It's like a continuous conveyor belt of ants and termites.
And once those insects reach the stomach, they encounter another interesting adaptation.
What's that?
Well, their stomach is somewhat similar to a bird's gizzard.
A gizzard.
Yes, it has these hardened folds and ridges that help to grind down the insects further.
So even though they don't have teeth, they have this muscular stomach that acts like a grinding mill.
Exactly, and here's another fascinating fact. Giant anteaters don't produce their own stomach acid.
What? No stomach acid.
Nope, they rely on the formic acid that's naturally present in the ants and termites they consume.
So they're essentially borrowing the digestive juices of their prey.
In a way, yes, it's a very unique adaptation, and it shows just how specialized they are to their insect-based diet.
It's amazing how nature comes up with these incredible solutions.
It is, and while they get most of their moisture from the insects they eat, they might also dig for water, especially in drier environments.
So they're resourceful when they need to be.
Absolutely. They've evolved to survive in a variety of habitats and conditions.
So we've covered their diet in detail. What about reproduction? How often do they reproduce?
Well, giant anteaters can mate throughout the year, and the gestation period, the time between conception and birth, is typically around 170 to 190 days.
So almost 6 months?
Yes, and they usually give birth to a single offspring called a pup.
And the pups, they're pretty tiny when they're born, right?
They are. They weigh only 1 to 2 kilograms at birth, and their eyes are closed.
So they're pretty helpless at first.
They are, but they develop quickly, and they have a dedicated mother to care for them.
I imagine that maternal bond we talked about earlier is really important at this stage.
Absolutely. The mother is solely responsible for raising her offspring.
And she carries the pup on her back, right?
She does, just like we discussed earlier, providing both transport and camouflage for the young one.
And the pup stays on her back for quite a while, right?
Yes, several months, until it's large enough and strong enough to walk and forage on its own.
And it nurses for quite a while too, right?
Yes, up to 10 months, the mother's milk provides all the nutrients the pup needs to grow and thrive.
And those sharp whistles that the pups make, those are just adorable.
They are. It's their way of communicating with their mother, letting her know where they are and if they need anything.
So it's not just a physical bond, it's a very vocal one as well.
It is, and it's fascinating to observe those interactions between mother and offspring.
How long does it take for the young anteaters to reach sexual maturity?
It varies a bit, but typically somewhere between 2.5 and 4 years of age.
So they have a relatively long childhood, so to speak.
They do, which makes sense given their specialized lifestyle. They need time to learn the skills necessary to survive on their own, to find ant and termite nests, to dig them open, and to use that amazing tongue effectively.
And their lifespan in the wild It's not as long as some other mammals, right?
Wow. Not as long as some, but still a decent lifespan. On average, they live around 15 years in the wild.
But they can live much longer in captivity, right?
They can. In zoos and other controlled environments, they can live up to twice as long, sometimes reaching 30 years of age.
It's amazing how a change in environment can have such a significant impact on lifespan.
It is, and it highlights the importance of creating suitable habitats and protecting these animals from threats in their natural environments.
Speaking of threats, what are the main dangers that giant anteaters face in the wild?
Well, despite their size and their formidable claws, they do have natural predators.
Like what?
Primarily jaguars and pumas, these large cats are capable of taking down even an adult giant anteater.
So they're not invincible.
No, not at all. And when they're threatened, they have a pretty impressive defensive display.
What do they do?
They'll rear up on their hind legs, using their bushy tail for balance, and slash out with those powerful front claws.
So they're not afraid to fight back.
Not at all. And those claws can inflict serious wounds, potentially deterring even a determined predator.
And they can host certain parasites as well, right?
They can. They're known to host acanthocephalan intestinal parasites, though the impact of these parasites on their health is not fully understood.
So it's possible that these parasites could weaken them or make them more susceptible to other threats.
It's possible, but more research is needed to determine the exact effects of these parasites on giant anteater populations.
Now, shifting gears to their conservation status, things are not looking too good for the giant anteater, are they?
Unfortunately, no. They're currently classified as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List, which means they're facing a high risk of extinction in the wild.
And they're also listed on CITES Appendix 2.
They are, which means that international trade in giant anteaters and their parts is regulated to prevent further declines in their populations.
So what are the main threats that are driving these declines?
Well, the biggest threat by far is habitat loss.
Habitat loss. In what way?
Well, as humans continue to expand their footprint on the planet, we're encroaching on giant anteater habitat, converting forests and grasslands into agricultural land, urban areas, and other human-dominated landscapes.
So they're losing their homes and their food sources.
Exactly. And this habitat fragmentation also makes it harder for them to find mates and disperse to new areas.
And wildfires are a problem too, right?
They are, especially in areas where humans have altered fire regimes, making wildfires more frequent and more intense.
So not only are they losing habitat, but the remaining habitat is also becoming more dangerous.
Exactly. And then there's the direct threat of poaching.
Poaching for what?
Well, some people hunt them for their fur, which can be used to make clothing and other items. And in some areas, they're also hunted for their meat.
It's sad to think that these animals are being killed for such frivolous reasons.
It is. And then there's the growing problem of road mortality.
Road mortality.
Yes. As roads are built through giant anteater habitat, it increases the likelihood of them being hit by vehicles.
So it's not just the loss of habitat, it's also the increased danger of crossing roads.
Precisely. And all of these threats combined are putting immense pressure on giant anteater populations.
And it's already led to their disappearance from some areas, right?
Sadly, yes, they've been extirpated from several countries and parts of their former range.
So they're no longer found in those places at all.
Not anymore, and if we don't take action to protect them, they could disappear from even more areas in the future.
So what can be done to conserve giant anteaters?
Well, there are a number of conservation efforts underway, including the establishment and management of protected areas.
So setting aside land where they can live undisturbed.
Exactly. And some countries and local governments are working to raise awareness about the importance of giant anteater conservation.
Educating people about the threats they face and the need to protect them.
Precisely. And in some cases, local communities are involved in monitoring giant anteater populations and reporting any threats.
So it's a collaborative effort involving scientists, conservationists, and local people.
It is. And in Argentina, some local governments have gone even further, declaring the giant anteater a national heritage species.
Wow, that's quite an honor.
It is. It gives them a higher level of legal protection and recognizes their cultural and ecological importance.
It's encouraging to see that some governments are taking these steps to protect this unique animal.
It is, and hopefully these efforts will help to ensure that giant anteaters continue to roam the forests and grasslands of South America for generations to come.
Now, shifting gears a bit, I'd like to talk about the giant anteater's relationship with humans, particularly its role in folklore and mythology.
Oh, yes, they have a fascinating presence in the cultures of indigenous peoples in their native range.
Really, tell me more.
Well, in many Amazonian cultures, the giant anteater is often depicted as a trickster figure in myths and folk tales.
A trickster, like a cunning and mischievous character.
Exactly. They're often portrayed as using their wits and their unusual abilities to outsmart other animals or humans.
Do you have any specific examples?
Well, there's a Shipibo story where an anteater outsmarts a jaguar using its long snout to steal fish from the jaguar's catch.
A hugger.
And in the Yoruba myth, a malevolent being is transformed into an anteater as a form of punishment, highlighting both its unusual appearance and its association with the underworld.
So they're not always seen in a positive light.
Not always, but they're always respected for their unique qualities and their place in the natural order.
And the Kayapo people of Brazil, they incorporate anteater masks into their ceremonies, right?
They do. They use these beautifully crafted masks in naming and initiation ceremonies. And there's a whole set of protocols and symbolic meanings associated with them.
So it's not just a random costume. It has deep cultural significance.
Exactly. It represents a connection to the natural world, to the spirits of the animals, and to the traditions of their ancestors.
It's amazing how these animals are woven into the very fabric of their culture.
It is, and it speaks to the deep respect that these indigenous peoples have for the natural world and the creatures that inhabit it.
Now, on a slightly more humorous note, I was reading about a rather peculiar misconception that arose about giant anteaters during the Spanish colonization of the Americas.
Oh, yes, that's a rather amusing bit of history.
What was that?
When live giant anteaters were first brought to Europe, people were understandably fascinated by these strange creatures.
I can imagine they're unlike anything found in Europe.
Exactly. And because of the limited number of specimens that were brought over, and perhaps some misinterpretations of their anatomy, a rather curious belief took hold.
What was the belief?
People started to believe that only female giant anteaters existed, and that they reproduced through their noses.
Through their noses.
Yes, it's a rather bizarre idea, but it was widely circulated at the time.
So how did this misconception get corrected?
Well, it took the careful observations of a naturalist named Felix de Azara to set the record straight.
What did he do?
He studied giant anteaters in their natural habitat in South America, and he was able to clearly demonstrate that both males and females exist and that they reproduce in a much more conventional manner.
I'm sure that cleared up a lot of confusion.
I would imagine so, and it highlights the importance of careful observation and scientific inquiry in understanding the natural world.
And beyond folklore and misconceptions, the giant anteater has also made its way into popular culture, right?
Oh, absolutely. They've appeared in various forms of media and art over the years.
Like where?
Well, the surrealist painter Salvador Dali famously incorporated the giant anteater into some of his works.
Dali, the artist known for his melting clocks and other bizarre imagery.
The very same. And for Dali, the giant anteater seemed to represent something both strange and alluring, fitting in perfectly with his surrealist style.
Makes sense. And they've popped up in cartoons as well, haven't they?
They have. There's a classic Max Fleischer cartoon from 1940 called Ants and the Plants, where an anteater is portrayed as a somewhat villainous character obsessed with consuming ants.
So they're not always the heroes of the story.
Not always, but they always make for memorable characters.
And perhaps their most famous pop culture appearance is as a university mascot, right?
That's right. The beloved mascot of the University of California, Irvine, is none other than Peter the Anteater.
Peter the Anteater. How did that come about?
Well, the inspiration came from the long-running comic strip BC, which featured a recurring giant anteater character.
So from the pages of a comic strip to the sidelines of a major university, that's quite a journey.
It is, and it's a testament to the giant anteater's unique appeal and its ability to capture people's imaginations.
And they've even made their way into the realm of horror, haven't they?
They have, in Stephen King's miniseries Kingdom Hospital, there's a rather terrifying creature that bears a striking resemblance to an anteater, but with razor-sharp teeth.
So they can be both endearing mascots.